to another episode of Kinfolk Chronicles. I'm Amani Matua. Today I have an amazing guest. He actually wrote a book called Beyond Shame. Today we have Jeff Georgi. Tell us a little bit more about your job description and why you decided to author a book.
Well, thank you, Amani. I've been in the field a long time. I started all the way back in 1983 in the first methadone clinic in Durham, North Carolina, with a wonderful physician, Dr. Charlie Llewellyn. Eventually I got to Duke, which is where I met Dr. Carter, and also worked at Lincoln Community Health Center, where we were developing a mother-child treatment program. So I've been in the field of addiction for a long time, and although I'm kind of in a temporary status with Duke now, I'm still associated with the medical school. And my wife and I, about 15, maybe like 12 years ago, got a call from South Carolina, and it was their director of substance abuse services for the entire state. And what he wanted us to do was to train his entire program. And his name is Bob Toomey, and he had a vision. He had 33 separate facilities, and they were all doing different things. They didn't even have the same kind of unified definition of what addiction was. So what he wanted was not to homogenize, but at least to make the system speak with one voice.
A little more uniform.
Right, and I thought he was nuts, but he was serious, and we spent almost 10 years going back and forth to South Carolina, which is why in a lot of ways I disappeared from North Carolina. We still lived here and worked here, but much of our time was committed to South Carolina. And what we learned out of that was, despite the clear research, despite all the millions and millions of dollars that the National Institute of Health, National Institute of Drug Abuse have put into trying to help people understand this disease, it is still profoundly misunderstood, and even with the people who treat it. So out of that experience, we saw a lot of young clinicians who really wanted to help their patients, which is understandable. That's why they got in the field. But they didn't have the tools. They didn't have a conceptual frame of the illness. So in an effort to help them find a more comprehensive, more updated way of looking at the illness, we spent a lot of time not only training, but developing a training manual, and eventually what we called the Leadership Academy, which was a group of 12 people who learned to do what Becky and I were doing, which was to not only teach what the addiction was from the biological, psychological, social, spiritual, experiential model. It's a mouthful, but that's the model that I taught at Duke for years, and taught them. And this group of 12 not only learned that, but they learned a structured but integrative model of group called modified intergroup psychotherapy. And it's a way of helping people fight the isolation of addictive disease. So it was just an incredible experience. And as that was winding down, they all basically, in a lot of ways, just assumed that I had a book.
Wow.
But I didn't. And that experience kind of bumped right up against the COVID event in our culture. And so all of a sudden, my clinic is closed. Our outpatient practice is going to, Zoom. And I think I've got all this time on my hands, which was not entirely true. But I decided, okay, I'm going to write the book. And I honestly thought, naively, that I could just whip that thing out. writing a writing a book for me anyway was really hard, and it took me almost 4 years to get it in the form that it is today. And so the full title, Beyond Shame, Healing the Pain Beneath the Surface of Addiction, not only gives young clinicians and families and patients a clear definition of what the illness is, but that's section 1. Section 2 talks about how you treat it, what clinicians need to do to help patients feel acknowledged and honored and welcomed into the treatment experience. And then the third section is actual case studies that kind of help the reader see what I would do in a real life situation. So that's how the book got done. It would never have been finished without my wife, Becky, who is kind of the organizing principle in my life, and she and I worked together, so it worked very, very well. Yeah. But that's how it got started. And I think it's a pretty good product. Would I change it? Sure. But I think it captures the complexity of the disease in a way that is understandable, but very clear in terms of we're not talking about moral failure, we're not talking about personality constructs, we're not talking about all the other kind of crazy theories out there, but it's an illness like so many that have a biological foundation, but also are impacted by a person's psychological issues, primarily shame. There is a social context, again, to all disease. And it's important to honor that. The spiritual aspect, there's a construct that I developed years ago called the spiritual platform, which is a structured way of looking at spirituality, but separating it from religion. And I did that to help people who were moving into one of the 12-step programs, but had a problem with the God thing. And then that's the fourth pillar, and then the fifth one is the experience, life experience. And I saw on your menu of what you do here, trauma.
Yes.
Trauma changes everything.
Absolutely.
So if we don't look at those 5 variables together and then help clinicians address them, we may get a person abstinent. In other words, stop their drug use for a short period of time, but they're not going to get into recovery.
I see.
So that's
reoccurring. It'll be sort of a cyclical thing there.
Exactly.
Okay, so again, we're so happy to have you here at the Carter Clinic. As you mentioned, we do engage in trauma therapy along with psychiatric evals, medication management, peer support, and a lot of other services to help the community. Now, you say that you wrote the book around COVID time, so 5 or so years ago now is sort of when you got into action, although I'm sure the thoughts have been developing for a few years. But you've been in the industry for much longer than that, 20 or so more years.
Actually 40 years, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah, long time.
So what made you get into this industry in the first place? Obviously, the book is the culmination of some of your thoughts about the practice, but what was that initial urge? Was it helping people in the community? Was it developing a resource that wasn't there for people?
There's both a personal and professional reason. I come from a family that is pretty well anchored in addiction. I mean, and so that was always on my radar. But I initially, when I finished my undergraduate degree, went to seminary thinking I was going to be a parish priest. And one of the things that you do in that process is you are, in my denomination, which is the Episcopal Church, you are expected to do what's called clinical pastoral education, which is at least a 2-year master's program in a hospital setting. So I'm in a hospital setting acting as a chaplain, really not knowing what I'm doing, but every time I see, not every patient, but almost everywhere I look, yes, people are there for heart attacks and trauma and infections, but if you look 1 inch below the surface, what got them to those problems was addictive disease, and nobody was addressing it. So I went back to my bishop and said, this is what I'm seeing, and I'd love to try to address some of this, and I don't feel like I've got the tools. Can I have would you fund me to go get a PhD in addictionology? And he said, sure. Nice. Well, that was back in 1976, and that didn't exist. Didn't exist. So even though I was accepted to a graduate program in psychology, they came to me after they really were clear what I wanted and said, we can't even form a committee to help you study this. So what I did was I got another master's and was lucky enough to hook up with this Charles Llewellyn, who was the head of community psychiatry that preceding James Carter, which is pretty cool. It does. It's remarkable. And Charlie was great. And he realized that I didn't know what I was doing. But he was willing to take a gamble, and he was opening the methadone program in Durham. So I worked for him, and the deal that he made with me was, you can work here, but every Friday, I don't want you to come to the clinic. You need to go to the Duke Medical School library and spend 10 hours reading. And I thought, this guy's crazy. But,
a lot of research.
Well, he realized that I didn't know, and that the field back then was actually suspicious of people with degrees.
Why is that?
Well, again, we're now talking about the early 80s, and this is rough, but I would say 90% of the people who were providing services were male, not degreed, may not even have had, not even an undergraduate degree.
Oh, wow.
But they were in recovery. And that was the primary certificate, for lack of a better term, that people wanted to see with people providing services.
So they can relate, but at the same time, they don't really have as you mentioned before, the sort of biological training or sort of enhanced higher education to help them along.
Right, that's exactly it. And which is radically different than the field now. But again, all the way back then, that wasn't the case, and what Charlie Llewellyn wanted me to have was an academic foundation in addition to going to AA meetings, looking at my own issues, looking at my own recovery, and facing some issues in my own life. And so all those came together in a wonderful way. I worked with him for a number of years and then did some other things, always in the field. So I've been in the field doing different things since 1983.
Wow. You're a well of knowledge. And you say that you actually were in contact with not the Carter Clinic as such, but with Dr. Carter.
Yeah.
Okay, so when did you guys meet?
Okay, so I work with Charlie in the methadone program, which was not a direct connection to Duke. I then take kind of a left turn or right turn, or whatever you want, and I got an appointment to the United States Probation Service as their drug specialist, and so I worked with not only other federal probation officers, but with people who had primarily either drug-related criminal activity or, again, had this underlying drug issue that pushed them toward criminality. and that was an incredible experience. But I did that until I felt that I'd gotten enough from that and was no longer able to really give much more to the service. And the next step was Duke, and that was in 1990.
Wow.
So that's about the time that Dr. Carter really starts doing his thing. And so I was in the Department of Psychiatry. He, of course, was in the Department of Psychiatry, but he was also working at Lincoln Community Health Center. And through talking with him, one of the things that, and it seemed, again, the field was still growing back then. It still is, but there was a lot of this kind of colloquial wisdom that wasn't actually accurate. And I think he was really committed to try to bring science to the treatment of addictive illness. But one of the things he had identified was a kind of an interesting problem in the field, which was if a woman had children and she was also struggling with addictive disease, what the theory was that we had to separate her from her kids, particularly if they were little kids, so she wouldn't get distracted during treatment. Well, Dr. Carter's position was, what is she going to go back to once she finishes treatment?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Right, she's going to go back to the kids.
Yeah.
So what he recommended was that we build a program that treated pregnant women with young children, and treat not just the mother's addiction, but treat the mother-child unit. That became our patient. And it became a model for the state of North Carolina. And right now, although the family care program, which is what it was named, is no longer active at Duke, the University of North Carolina hospital, back then was called Memorial Hospital, they developed a really wonderful program, which is still very much operative, called Horizons. And they are now kind of the flagship program that is carrying on a lot of what Dr. Carter talked about and what we built in the family care program. So that connection, and in addition just to listening to him talk about the power of culture and all of the other variables that we weren't paying attention to back then, helped me grow as a clinician and broaden my worldview.
Oh, that's amazing. Like I said, you're well acknowledged. It seems like you were there on the ground floor for a lot of the frameworks that they use today. You've seen the industry change so much, and thank you for writing that book, because I think it's going to add to something great, and I think it's going to be really, really big. So once again, please purchase Beyond Shame. We actually right now are led, after continuing Dr. Carter's work, by our CEO. He's a psychiatrist, Dr. Harrison. He's making sure that as a behavioral health clinic that we are continue to make sure that people get the services that they need. What's some advice you would have for sort of some clinics out here, all the institutions, all the various resources that we have, in terms of, in your book you talk about spirituality, you talk about experiential. That seems like a very big difference than what's actually been happening in the past. It seems like it's just a drastic change in how fast the industry is surging forward. Can you just sort of get a little deeper into the experiential and the spiritual model specifically?
Sure. I believe spirituality and kind of its parallel in the human experience is our sensuality. We are all sensual beings. We interact with the world through our senses, our eyes, our ears, our skin, but if we're not paying attention to that, we're not really able to use it in a way that could support recovery. The same is true with spirituality. I believe that all human beings are spiritual beings, and that it's absolutely core to who we are. And this was, again, kind of a Charlie Llewellyn thing, but he wanted me to come up with a model, and so I looked at where people were struggling, and it seemed like at times, although obviously religion was important to me, because that's what I thought I was going to be doing life-wise, turned out I took it, but anyway, religion is still very important to me, but I saw it being almost a block to some people. So the spiritual platform looks at what is it about the human experience that is unique. What is it that we do? So spirituality to me is a doing thing. It's not some mystical myth. It's about what is it that is so unique to us that we do, and in the concept it's the basic four things. We make conscious choices. Now think in your mind as I go through this quickly, what addiction does to each one of these pillars. So we make conscious choices, and to the extent that we can own those choices, we feel our agency, we grow, we feel more powerful. The interesting thing about our species, however, is we are great at denying that we make the choices in the first place. In other words, we're a species of excuse makers. A silly example. You're out there waiting for the school bus, and you've got an important meeting with your boss at work, and the school bus doesn't come. This has actually happened to me before cell phones existed. Now you just pick up your cell phone and call. But if you go back far enough, that's before cell phones, what would you do? Well, you get your kid to school. Well, you finally show up to your meeting with your boss, but you're 30 minutes late. What comes out of your mouth almost automatically is, I am so sorry I am late, but I had to take my kids to school. Is that true?
No, it is an excuse.
No, it is. You could have done a lot of other things. I mean, you could have left them there. That would have been problematic, but you could have. You could have taken them to the meeting. The point is, we constantly don't own the choices that we make. And some people might find it a little abrasive, but the real answer is to your boss, I'm sorry I'm late, but I chose to do something more important. And that would be, if your boss could understand it in contextual, that'd be an honest answer. Yes. And I hope they'd approach it. So that's choice. Risk. Risk is a particular kind of choice, and it's how we grow as human beings. In order to grow intellectually, in order to grow emotionally, in order to grow in almost any of our endeavors, we have to take a risk. If we're going to grow intellectually, we have to look at ideas that may conflict with ours. We live in a political time with a lot of turmoil, but in order to grow politically, we've got to listen to the other side and be willing to kind of find common ground. So risk is uncomfortable, but without risk, you don't grow. And I think in so many ways, Dr. Carter and certainly Charlie Llewellyn encouraged me to do that. Was, Jeff, you've got a lot of biases. You think you know things you probably don't know. Have the courage to study and challenge what you think you know and be open to what more is out there. So that's risk in a lot of other ways, but risk. Relationships. Relationships are absolutely core to who we are as a species. And without relationships, I don't believe we recover. And we certainly don't have full lives. And then finally, the fourth pillar is the experience of awe and wonder. And what that simply is encountering something for which you don't have a nice, convenient box. We put things in boxes, and that's how we kind of navigate our world. But every now and then, at least my higher power, and I'm sure yours, will put something in front of you that you just don't have a box for.
Yeah.
That, you know, an
incredible.
Right, or you don't even have, like, I can be seeing a beautiful sunset, and it may just catch me off guard, and all of a sudden I go, wow, you know. And my wife and I years ago were lucky enough to be in South Carolina when there was a total eclipse. I thought I would be ready for that, but I mean, it just, I had no reference for the sun literally going dark and all of the animals kind of thinking it was night. It was awesome. So choice, risk, relationship, and the participation in awe serve the foundation of spirituality and require that we pay attention to those four activities. Very briefly, think of what addiction does to choices. Right. Very quickly, the disease starts making the choice for you. It drives me nuts to hear people talk about drug of choice. Nobody chooses the drug that takes over their life. Nobody. It chooses them. And no one chooses addiction. It's a disease. It's like cancer. Nobody chooses cancer. Now, people will say, okay, well, what about that smoker who's smoking tobacco and they get lung cancer? They didn't choose the lung cancer. I mean, they chose to smoke, and they may have gotten addicted to the nicotine, but the last thing in the world they wanted was lung cancer. And yet we connect the two and don't realize that what addiction does is it takes away choice. It also takes away risk. It looks risky, but in reality, once the drug of addiction grabs you by the throat, it walls you off. It becomes your primary coping mechanism. And so it cushions you from life. And so risk, you don't even see the opportunities in front of you. Relationships, I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, it destroys relationships. And in terms of the last pillar on wonder, life is no longer wonderful, it is awful. And addiction is awful. Yeah. At its core, addiction undermines spirituality, and hence, in order to support people in recovery, we need to help them regain the capacity, not the capacity, their awareness of the choices they make, their willingness to take growth-producing risks, their commitment to the relationships in their lives, and finally the participation in the awe and wonder that surrounds them all the time, but they don't even see it.
Yeah. That's part of recovery as well.
Yeah.
We see that when you talk about a sunset, when you see about those singular, unique moments that make life a lot better, sometimes those addictions and those struggles can blind us from that, and they dull your awareness.
Right,
and
exactly.
We can't blame the people for something that the society will freely provide, like alcohol, they're all over the place.
All over the place.
So it's kind of hard to avoid some of this on TV, all these advertisements, and that's not something that this industry can change. This industry sort of stands as a bulwark against some of the more negative effects of drug addiction. So, like you said, it leads people to criminality. So, isn't part of our duty to try to help people before they land themselves in a place that they can't recover from?
Absolutely. And again, part of my experience in the criminal justice system, I mean, and this is a tragic statement, but the biggest, quote unquote, treatment agency in our country is the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really treat people, it just punishes.
They get the most money, though.
They do. And we've got to look at that. We've got to be willing to take that courageous step and say what we're doing isn't working. And if we don't help that person truly move into recovery, and I'm not saying decriminalize all drugs. That's a political issue. But I do think it's really important for us to look at not only the unfortunate kind of racial bias there is to the enforcement of certain drug laws, but also the behavior associated with addiction can lead a person into criminality, quote unquote. But they're not criminal. They're addicted. They're sick. And so I'm not trying to in any way take responsibility from individuals, but at the same time, as a culture, as a society, we need to look at what works. And prison doesn't really help anybody.
The numbers seem to suggest that it does not.
Right.
Do you think that there is a way we can say, like, non-criminal lines, 911, instead of calling 911, you call like a crisis control team? Do you think that those are effective?
Absolutely. And programs like yours. I mean, the more community outreach we have, the more we're willing to kind of stretch ourselves, and that's what we need. We need to have places of safety for people to get the care that they deserve and be in the community and available to the community, so we can perhaps get ahead of the criminal activity. And when that happens, if there's a clear connection, and that was really what I got to do as a federal probation officer, if there was a clear connection between the person's addiction and their quote unquote crime, I could talk to the judge and we could navigate that in a way that would often lead them to a halfway house instead of prison and treatment while they were in that halfway house. If they were willing to do that, then their active sentence could be postponed. So there are things we can do to use what we've got if we just change our attitude.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for your words. What is the main thing you think that people should adopt from your book? If you could choose one thing, one or two, one thing that you think that this industry now, currently, can learn from your book specifically and adopt? Because your book is very solution-oriented.
Well, it is, and I think the biggest thing is that even though we say addiction is a disease, I don't think we believe it.
It's not treated like one.
No, it is not treated like one, and it's not even treated like one in some treatment agencies. And I think that what Beyond Shame does or tries to do is to help people recognize that this is a disease just like cancer, just like heart disease, just like all the other illnesses that we clearly understand and have empathy for the person who has the illness. In the case of addiction, the disease, yes, it has a biological foundation, but it's also driven psychologically by the power of shame. And what unfortunately we often do, in my opinion, is we end up shaming our patients, and that just makes it worse. Rather than truly understand, they don't want this, and they never did. But it got them, just like cancer gets people. And we have to have a commitment to see clearly that it is a disease and that it can be treated. And, as I'm sure that you guys see, the vast majority of people we're privileged to treat get better. The problem, culturally, is the culture doesn't see that. All it sees is the headlines about someone who is struggling with addiction and the problems they call in families, or the car accident, or the criminal stuff, all that stuff. They don't see the recovering folks. They just, because they're into the excitement and enthusiasm of a new life that they have discovered and worked for and been supported in, like you guys do here. And that, to me, I hope is the message of the book, that number one, it's an illness, it is treatable. Part of the treatment needs to be the treatment of the shame, and we've got to stop shaming our patients individually as well as culturally.
Okay, that's a lesson. That's something that needs to be adopted forthwith, if you're asking me. Your correlation between cancer and addiction, I think that's really interesting, because I think even lay people have a way of looking at cancer as purely scientific. It's been metastasized and we can operate or we can't. And with addiction, especially here at the Carter Clinic, I've learned that we have to be community engaging. We have to be forward facing. We have to face the people, talk with the people.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a distinction between the two diseases. I think that it costs for the clinicians, for the family members, for those addicted themselves to have awareness, empathy, and I think, of course, you must have empathy for those with cancer as well, but dealing with people's psychology and the trauma that you explained was just beneath that first layer. You have to deal with it a bit of a different way. So while we can adopt some of those methods of trying to lower shame, how do we exact them?
Well,
when you talk with people, because you're obviously a counselor, you take patients. You've been in many different fields throughout your life, and you've come across a diverse range of people. First of all, I would like some stories about those at some point, if you don't mind sharing. But specifically, engaging with people, how do you deal with everyone's personal dilemmas? They're all different.
Right.
How do you navigate that?
Well, I think we first have to recognize that we don't know. In other words, when I'm sitting across from a 19-year-old black kid from East Durham in my clinic, and he's been sent there by his parents, I've got to be real clear with him, and I would literally say something like, I'm making up his name, but Brandon, I know it's going to come as a surprise, but I'm an old white guy. And you're a young black kid from East Durham, and I don't have a clue what your life is like. And I want to learn what your life is like, and I want to honor your struggle. I want to honor the culture out of which you come. But you've got to teach me. So if we start there, if we start, in a sense, knowing the illness but not knowing the person, I think we open that door to them telling us what they need. And again, from a clinical point of view, I think that's the foundation of any quality treatment, is that we listen to our patients with compassion, understanding, and an openness and a willingness to suspend our judgment and listen to them, because ultimately, I believe, if we listen carefully enough, they're going to have their own answers internally. They just don't know it. And so Brandon's going to tell me what he needs, and then it's my job to help him make that happen.
Yeah, that is the distinction that I think many watching are looking at, and I feel like they can relate to that quite a bit, because we all meet people of different walks of life.
Yeah.
And empathy is one of the primary tools. Active listening to people, as you just elaborated on, speaking with your clients in Durham and elsewhere. So you were in North Carolina and South Carolina based primarily during this journey. Can you tell us just a little bit more of some of the things you've experienced during your long career?
Oh, wow. I mean, I have seen, I a long time ago, lost track of the number of patients I've been privileged to treat. But I've worked with people who, in the eyes of society, and I use this phrase kind of intentionally, are often seen as throwaway people. One of the first women that really helped me understand the power of this disease, and I'm going to be careful about. I'm going to use a different name. I'm going to call her Sally, but that was not her name. She had a much more ethnic name. She was an African American woman. I met her at Duke when I was working in OB, and she had just delivered a child who was positive for cocaine. So they called the Duke Addictions program and said, "Oh, we got a problem," and the social workers are all concerned, and so a lot of them didn't know we had the family care program already set up. So I go up and I'm talking to Sally, and I walk in this room, and there's something regal about this woman. And she wasn't in any way hostile, but it was sort of like, and she's sitting there holding her baby, and she sort of gives off this aura.
Yeah.
See me, respect me, love my kid, or get the hell out of here. I mean, it was powerful. And I sat and listened to her story, and in the eyes of the culture, she was 39 at the time. She'd never had a quote-unquote real job, never bought a car, never bought a house, never paid taxes. But in a relatively short period of time, when she got into recovery, she became the emotional and spiritual center of our program. And the number of people she helped get into recovery through just her presence was remarkable. But she also had a tragic heart problem because of the IV drugs that she had used for so much of her life. And what she needed was a heart transplant. And I probably will get in trouble for this, but the healthcare system at Duke didn't see that. And she was with us for a number of years, but not long enough, and eventually she died, needing a heart transplant. And I mean, I miss that woman. She touched me in ways that I still feel. And for our culture not to see her value makes me angry. And I use that anger when I get tired. And every now and then, I'm not going to use, I almost used her name. I go, okay, Sally, help me get through today. I'm tired. I want to go home, but I got 2 more people to see. Okay, let me take a breath. Sally, be with me. Yeah, and she's there. She hadn't left. And I don't want that humanity taken away, because that's how I'm going to touch the lives of my patients and allow them to touch me. And in a sense, you're asking me, am I okay? Yes, sort of. And no, I'm not okay with the way the culture treated her. I'm not okay with the way the culture treats a lot of our patients. And if I don't feel their pain and the loss of them when the culture doesn't help, there's something wrong with me. So thank you for asking.
Of course.
And I think that's the challenge of this field, is to be willing to feel the pain our patients bring with them without judgment, and to help them see the intrinsic core value that has always been there, but they've never seen it. So that's but one example. But I have seen, and on the other extreme, I have seen people of fabulous wealth absolutely miserable because of this disease. And money doesn't protect you.
No one's immune.
Nope, they really aren't. And I think we've got this weird belief that somehow affluence is gonna keep you safe. Well, it doesn't. And so I've had that incredible privilege of treating the full spectrum of the human experience and connect with folks in a way that I think helps them see their own value. And ultimately for them, I can't do it for them, but for them to be able to own that value because they are valued by others, which is, now we take a little side, and that's why group is so important.
Yes, we do a lot of group therapy here at the
Right.
Carter Clinic. It's one of our main methods of
Right.
recovery.
And that's what we did in South Carolina. We taught a different way. Rather than being a group leader, I taught young clinicians how to facilitate group. And the focus of that group is for the patients to connect with each other, for them to share their stories, for them to see in each other the inherent value and to celebrate that in this remarkable thing that we call group, which I can't imagine anything more human than a group of us Homo sapiens getting together and connecting. That's what we do.
Yes, community is very rewarding.
Yeah.
And it keeps us safe from a lot of the ills of life.
And it's healing.
Very healing.
And I think without community, which is why what you do here is so important. Without community, I don't think recovery happens. I mean, again, I'm maybe splitting hairs, but I think there's a difference between simply not using, abstinence, and recovery. I don't think you can find recovery without community. I just don't. Which is why I think group psychotherapy is just so important.
Well, if anyone would know, it would be you and others like you who have been committed to this for a long period of time and are still at it, still trying to make the industry better, still trying to make the community better, still allowing people and giving them spaces to heal. Jeff, thank you so much.
Yeah.
As I said, you're a well of knowledge. Jeff, give them your full name, give them your book title, tell them where to find it, and we can't wait to have you back.
Well, thank you, Imani. The book is Beyond Shame, Healing the Pain Beneath the Surface of Addiction. And my name is kind of funky. It's Jeffrey M. Georgi. That's spelled Georgi. You can get the book on Amazon, and you can get it through our website. And that's Georgi Educational Counseling. But if you just Google Jeff Georgi, it'll pop up. It's one of those odd enough names. It's easy to find. But I just appreciate your opportunity that you've given me to number one, get to know the Carter Center.
Of course, the Carter Clinic. I'm glad you came. We're
Yeah,
so
the
happy
center.
you came.
Well, and the Carter Clinic is, I'm sure I'd heard the name, but it's so neat that I got to know and knew your founder, who tragically died way too young, but did so much.
Yes.
And so the Carter Clinic, I want to learn more about what you guys do, and because I think, again, this is where change happens.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We will be giving you a tour of the entire facility. We also have 12 locations across North Carolina, including Kinston, Fayetteville, Dunn, Whitesville, Elizabethtown, and more. Check us out at thecarterclinic.com. We also have an Instagram page, The Carter Clinic. And we will be having Jeff back again, because we only scratched the surface here today. As you said, there's 1,000 layers. We have a long way to go to continue to make this industry better, and I don't think that this will ever be a solution that is permanently solved, but we're all committed to trying our best.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.